Are you looking to hit the wildcard button in Game Week 10? Well, this is the video for you. Right then, so starting off with the goalkeepers and defenders, I've gone for Areola as the starting goalkeeper. Game Week 10, he's got a really nice fixture against Everton. You can't say the Brentford fixture in Game Week 11 is a bad one either. And then he's got Forest, 3 really decent fixtures. 4.2 million is obviously incredible value, so I think it makes sense to go with him. Prizes in the comments if you can guess the other goalkeeper. It's not that hard. Cash, Udogie, Gabriel are the defence. I really like Cash for the attacking upside that he provides. The best expected goal involvement of any defender in the league so far this season. Udogie, I mean, you could swap him with Porro if you really wanted to. I mean, both of those are probably equal in terms of their likelihood of attacking returns in clean sheets. I just really like what I'm seeing from Spurs, both going forward and defensively. I think he's a really nice option. Gabriel is a player I wanted to talk about in a bit more detail because I think the wildcard gives you a unique opportunity to get on him. I'm not sure there are many managers that are going to spend a free transfer to get him, which makes me think that you could own him as a slight differential on the wildcard compared to managers who may have already played the chip or are holding on to it. He's now the cheapest starting Arsenal defender. 4.7 million. I do actually expect that value to go up, to be fair, over the next couple of weeks, but he looks to have nailed his spot again. What I will say, Arteta, certainly at the start of the season at least, he liked to play Partey at right back and Ben White at centre back against the low block, sort of lower level teams, which I guess you could class Sheffield United as. So there's a little bit of a risk, I guess, that he doesn't start. There's some cover on the bench, which you'll see in a second. He did have, although he's not proving it so far this season, last season he did have the highest expected goals amongst all the defenders in the Premier League last season. So he does have really good goal threat from set pieces. And I'd suggest the Sheffield United and Burnley games are 2 good opportunities for him to potentially score from set pieces. I know they conceded a couple of goals against Chelsea. One of them, of course, was Raya's fault. And they still think they're one of the best defences in the league, basically. So I wouldn't let the fact that they conceded 2 goals against Chelsea put me off. I think Gabriel is a really decent defender. Midfielders now then. I'm going to quickly go through all the 5 that I've gone for. And then there's one particular price category of midfielder that I wanted to talk about in a bit more detail. And one player in particular, again, I think is going to be really popular going into Game Week 10. Got Salah. He's actually the captain at the moment. He's got the highest expected points of any player in Game Week 10 against Nottingham Forest. Obviously, don't think you can really go without Salah, in my opinion, especially if he is the best captain for at least a few game weeks by the looks of it. Maddison is the Spurs midfielder I've gone for. You'll notice I've omitted Son from this draft. There's no Son. I think of all the Spurs players and the traditional big 3 of Haaland, Salah, Son, I think Son's the one you could go without. He hasn't actually played his fixture in Game Week 10 or Game Week 9 at the time that I'm recording this video. But I think regardless of how he gets on, I think you can get away with not having him, particularly because you're not going to captain him, I don't think. You're either going to captain Salah or Haaland, in my opinion. Maddison comes in a bit cheaper. I think you can go with him. Saka, I'll talk about him in a bit more detail coming up. I really like Jarrod Bowen as an option. He looks to have refound the form he was in a couple of seasons ago where he got double-digit goals and double-digit assists. 3 really decent fixtures coming up for West Ham, as we already covered with Areola, and he plays every game for 90 minutes. Speaking of a man that plays every game for 90 minutes, we've got Pedro Neto of Wolves, and I think he is the first of a multitude of midfielders that fill in a sort of sub 6 million price category. I don't really think there's a best one. Personally, I've got Pedro Neto. He's in my team. I think he has produced the most consistent returns of players around that price tag. And his expected assists are really high as well to back up the good number of assists that he has got. So I really do like him as an option. Next fixture in 10 is obviously tricky. Newcastle at home. So there are alternatives. Obviously, you could go for Cole Palmer. 4.9 million. Seems to be nailed in the Chelsea team. Pochettino really liking him. He's really involved in all the build-up play that Chelsea get forward with. Sterling reluctantly gave him the ball for the last Chelsea penalty. He's taken 2 Chelsea pens in a row, so you can now, I think, suggest that he is the given Chelsea penalty taker. I think he's playing with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, basically, proving that he deserves to be starting for a top Premier League team. So, yes, the fixtures coming up are tough, but I think he's going to show up and perform. And 4.9 million for a player that's delivering the returns that he's getting at the moment, you can see down there in the stats, that price is only going to rise. Gordon, of course, is the next one. There's 3 at this price tag I think are very much pickable. Gordon might have risen in price by the time I upload this video, but he looks to be the first choice left winger for Newcastle. With that Harvey Barnes injury, he obviously doesn't really have any competition for that position. I think Eddie Howe really admires his defensive work rate as well. Gordon gets really stuck in, which obviously doesn't really matter for FPL, but it does for his safety starting in that team. What does matter for FPL is his attacking returns. 7 starts this season, 3 goals, 4 assists, seems to be returning game after game. Got Wolves away in game week 10, he can probably return there as well. Just a quick chat then about Bukayo Saka and a potential alternative if you want to save a bit of cash and go a bit different. I really like him. I think FPL have really messed up his price this season at 8.5 million. Obviously, he's dropped from 8.6 to 8.5 because of that injury. A lot of managers took him out for a period of time where they didn't expect him to start, but he did start. He started against Chelsea and didn't actually play that well, wasn't massively involved in the game, but he showed up where it mattered and got an assist for the Trossard goal. He is Arsenal's designated penalty taker. Don't get me wrong, he's not taken them all. He has been given some of them away, but he is their designated penalty taker, so you can definitely fancy some pens to come from him. Regardless of whether he's the pen taker or not, he is Arsenal's talisman, their best player in that front line, and with little to no competition in that right wing position, I mean, he's going to play every game that he's even remotely fit for, as we've seen this season. And similar to Gordon, he puts in a really good shift defensively as well, and that's obviously what managers really want. So I think that only solidifies his place in the Arsenal team. And the next guy I want to talk about, if you wanted an alternative to Saka, you could go for Martinelli. Now, looking at the numbers, they've not been fantastic yet this season. Don't get me wrong, 0.31 expected returns per 90. Saka's sitting on 0.85, so there's a bit of a drop-off there. But he is only 4.6% owned at 7.7 million, so nearly $1 million cheaper than Saka, and a really nice low ownership if you want to go a bit different. I don't think the returns he's got this season quite show how well he's played. I don't really think his performance levels have dropped so much this season. I think he still looked really bright and promising for Arsenal, and against any opposition he can show up and be really dangerous. So I just wanted to talk about Martinelli there as a potential differential going against Saka. For the rest of this team, it's not really a surprise who I've gone with. Erling Haaland and Ollie Watkins up front, 2 of the best strikers in the game in my opinion, particularly Watkins for the next 3 fixtures. Obviously he can probably interchange with Alvarez if you fancy Alvarez as well, but I think for those 3 next fixtures, the form that Ollie Watkins is in, the fact he's going to play every game, no doubt in my mind he starts all 3 of those games if he's fit. He looks a really good option. Then of course, Erling Haaland. Next couple of weeks, he's not arguably the best captain. I think potentially you could well captain Salah against Forest, but then potentially Haaland against Bournemouth, who are, you know, sitting almost rock bottom of the league, similar, of course, to Luton. So I just don't think you can go without Erling Haaland. There's a couple of weeks where you might not want to captain him, but I mean, most weeks this season going forwards, I think you're going to want to. So makes sense to go with those 2. Just to talk about the team in summary then. So what I've done is I've built this team, but you're seeing the value that they are in my current FPL team. Some of these players I've owned all season and accumulated some price rises, so it doesn't quite reflect what you might be able to afford. But what I have done is I've left 0.4 million in the bank and also stuck Dan Burn on the bench. So if you wanted to, you could drop Dan Burn to someone even cheaper than that. Potentially drop Gabriel to someone even cheaper as well if you really wanted to. Cash could go down to someone cheaper, or you could potentially go for Martinelli over Saka as I just discussed. So plenty of options to allow you to build a team equally, in my opinion, probably as good as this one. If you can't quite afford this, that's why I put the asterisk next to the 0.4 million. But I think most players in the game will be able to afford a team very, very similar to this. And if you did, you're expected to get 71.7 points in game week 10. And I think you're really well set up for future game weeks. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a like rating on the video. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that wildcard draft in the comments. If you agree or disagree with any of those picks, I'd be happy to hear it. As I always say, FPL is all about different opinions. You know, if we all had the same opinion, we'd all have the same team and the game would be really boring. So if you think different to me, I'd be interested to know in the comments. Please subscribe as well if you want to see more content. It should be just there, and I will catch you in my next video.